They say some people are born into the background. That was me, Melissa. The big sister, the listener, the fixer. The one who shows up, always. Not because anyone asks, but because something inside won't let me walk away. When my younger brother Ethan got engaged to Isabel, I smiled like any proud sibling would. I'd never seen him this giddy, this perfectly rehearsed. She was elegant, poised. He played the part like he was auditioning for the role of husband of the year. We grew up close, Ethan and I. After Dad passed, I became his North Star. Late-night homework rescues, birthday surprises when Mom forgot. That kind of sister. So when he said they were planning a wedding at some luxury countryside retreat, I offered to help. Not just emotionally, I meant financially. It started with the venue deposit. Her parents are still finalizing some estate stuff, he said. Then came catering. The chef canceled family drama. Long story. Then photography. Do you still know that guy from your residency conference? Noah, right? Piece by piece, I became the silent sponsor, the invisible foundation. I wired payments after ER shifts and approved invoices between rounds. I never kept track because you don't itemize love. Until one afternoon, Isabel's voice trembled over brunch and she said, "I'm just so grateful for everything you're doing, Melissa. We really want this to be perfect." I nodded, drained. You've got it. $20,000 later, I had no seat at the table. Not yet, but I'd feel the cold draft soon. 2 weeks before the wedding, the silence became louder than any thank you. Ethan's texts dried up. Isabel stopped looping me in on decisions. My emails about the refrigeration truck necessary for the $5,000 French champagne she wanted went unread. I told myself they were just overwhelmed. Big day, big emotions. People get tunnel vision. I let it slide when I wasn't invited to the dress rehearsal. I looked the other way when my name didn't appear in the group itinerary. I even shrugged when Liam, our 17-year-old cousin, posted photos from the bridal brunch I hadn't been told about. But then came the message. I was reviewing shift rotations at the hospital when my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe, Isabel's best friend and maid of honor. "Hey, Melissa, just a heads up, Ethan's feeling really anxious and thinks it might be best if you don't come to the wedding. Some of Isabel's family said you've been kinda intense lately and it's making things tense for her. Hope you understand." I read it 3 times, then I put down my phone, stood in the break room, and stared at the vending machine like it could explain why the world had flipped on its axis. No call from Ethan, no email. Just this, uninvited through a bridesmaid with a sunshine emoji. And still, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even text back. I just felt something old and quiet inside me snap, like a thread worn too thin. Because it wasn't just a wedding. It was the years, the sacrifices, the bedtime stories, the emergency tuition payment, the day I missed my board exam to hold his hand at the funeral. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was a decision. And now, it was my turn to make one too. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The fridge hummed beside me. The hallway lamp buzzed with the faintest flicker. Familiar sounds, comforting in the way routine things are steady, expected. Unlike my brother, I didn't rage. I didn't spiral. I did what I was trained to do. I assessed the damage, weighed the consequences, and formulated a treatment plan. Because you see, when someone shows you exactly how little they value you, there's a brief moment just before the heartbreak swallows you where clarity shines through. I was sitting right in it. First, the generator company. The wedding venue, tucked in some picturesque countryside estate with a history of electrical outages, required backup power. I had booked a commercial-grade generator, the kind hospitals use during hurricanes. The invoice was still within the cancellation window. I called. The woman on the other end was cheerful and helpful. When I told her I needed to cancel, she didn't even ask why. "Of course, Dr. Hayes, that's no problem at all. We'll process the full refund today, Dr. Hayes." Not Ethan's sister, not the intense one. Just me, my name, my authority, my credit card. Next, the champagne distributor. Isabel had dreamed of a particular vintage. Not just champagne French imported, cellar-aged Blanc de Blancs from a boutique vineyard outside Epernay. Limited run. Eye-watering price tag. I'd arranged a refrigerated shipment, signed the customs documents myself, paid the holding fee. When I called the distributor, my voice didn't shake, but I laced it with the kind of weariness that wasn't hard to fake. There's been a change in plans, I told them. The man on the line paused. Do you want to cancel the shipment, Dr. Hayes? Yes. Please place the bottles on the wait list for another client. There was a silence, then a soft, professional reply. Understood. We'll issue the refund to the original payment method. Then came the caterer. This one was trickier. The deposit was non-refundable, but the remaining balance which I had agreed to cover had not been paid yet. They'd been waiting on final headcount confirmation. So I made a different kind of call. I won't be responsible for the balance, I said. Please expect to be contacted by the groom's family moving forward. That was all. No explanations, no theatrics, no accusations. I just stopped, quietly, efficiently, completely. The photographer Noah was the last to know. He was a college friend. We'd done volunteer work together back in med school. He knew I wasn't someone who ever made scenes. You still shooting the wedding? He asked when I called. No, I said. You're off the hook. I heard him exhale on the other end. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. The wedding day came. I didn't go. Instead, I ordered Thai food, curled up with my dog, and put on a documentary about space medicine. My phone buzzed once, twice. Then it buzzed more. I ignored it. By nightfall, I had 57 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and one group chat meltdown screenshot sent by Noah that I didn't ask for, but which made me snort laugh into my pad thigh. The generator didn't arrive. The champagne, MIA. The refrigeration truck never made it. The caterer never showed. The temperature at the countryside venue hit 94 degrees. The blackout began mid-toast. At 11:03 p.m., I watched a TikTok video someone tagged me in. A 3-second clip. Isabel, drenched in sweat, screaming into a phone while guests fan themselves with wedding programs in the background. I don't care how, just get the lights back on. The caption, when you ghost the one who paid for your fantasy wedding, and karma brings the blackout. The fallout was immediate. Photos posted in candlelight. People complaining about spoiled entrees, makeup melting, and awkward silence. One video showed the DJ packing up early while someone yelled about ruined memories. But the one that really got to me, was a shaky clip of Ethan standing alone by the melted cake, whispering something into his phone. He looked lost. And I hated that a part of me still felt something. But then I remembered the text, the way I had been erased, not gently, not respectfully, like I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved with an emoji and a bridesmaid. And I reminded myself, he chose this. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Ethan, a message from Chloe, even a text from Uncle Henry. They were asking about the champagne, about the power, about why everything had fallen apart. But they already knew. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because for the first time in a long time, I was done being the scaffolding for someone else's fantasy. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the martyr. I was just the one who finally stopped. Days passed. The buzz around the wedding that wasn't began to fade, the way viral disasters always do. But for me, it lingered, like heat trapped under the skin. I didn't speak about it to anyone, not even to my colleagues at the hospital who had seen the TikToks and offered tight-lipped sympathy or bemused disbelief. I went on with my life rounds, charts, late-night coffee breaks in the trauma bay, but I carried that silence everywhere. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't pride either. It was something heavier. Grief, maybe. Not for the wedding, not for the money, but for the idea of who Ethan had been. The boy who used to chase me around the backyard with water balloons. The teenager who sat beside me through Dad's funeral, clutching my hand like it was the last stable thing in the world. The kid I fought for in every parent-teacher conference. That version of him, the one I would have given anything for, was gone. Or maybe he just never existed. Then, 2 weeks later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. My name written in soft cursive that bled slightly from water, maybe rain, maybe tears. No postage stamp either, hand-delivered. I opened it on the front steps without sitting down. Something told me it wouldn't take long. Inside was a single piece of paper. 4 words. I shouldn't have done that. No greeting, no name, no signature. But I recognized the handwriting. Isabel. It was hesitant, uneven. The ink bled where the pen must have paused too long on one word. That. As if even in regret, she couldn't bring herself to say what it was. I stared at the note until the wind tried to pull it from my hands. I didn't respond. Instead, I slipped it into a drawer, one I rarely opened, right next to old birthday cards from Dad and a photo of Ethan and me at his high school graduation. I wasn't keeping it as a keepsake. I was keeping it as evidence, not legal, emotional. Evidence that even the people who smile at you with their whole faces can be the ones to erase you, line by line, when you're no longer convenient. And still, I wasn't angry. Not in the way people expect. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. Not on social media. Not at the altar. Just one conversation. One moment where Ethan would say, "I'm sorry. I used you. I should have done better, but I should have known better." Because what came next wasn't apology, it was exposure. The first sign of it came from Noah, my friend, and the almost wedding photographer. He texted me a screenshot from Facebook, a post in a private wedding planning group. A guest, apparently a distant cousin of Isabel's, had written a long, brutally detailed rant about a wedding gone wrong. She didn't name names, but she didn't need to. The story was unmistakable. Blacked out ballroom, heat wave conditions, no champagne, no dinner past appetizers, guests leaving early, bride melting down literally, and whisperings that the groom's sister had funded the entire event only to be cut from the guest list last minute. The comments blew up. Vendors chimed in. Other brides asked questions. Speculations turned to theories. And within 48 hours, the story made its way to a lifestyle blog under the headline, "The Wedding That Went Dark." A story of entitlement, secrets, and one silent power move. Ethan and Isabel went quiet, but silence can't undo exposure. A few days later, Mom called. She'd been quiet during all this, unsure whether to intervene or observe. Her voice was soft. "Careful. Melissa," Isabel told her side to some of the family. "Said you ghosted them, that it was a misunderstanding, that you just disappeared." I let her speak, let her fill the silence with rationalizations. Then, calmly, I said, "I didn't disappear. I was erased. And when that happened, I stopped holding everything up." There was a long pause. "You were like a second mother to him, you know," she said. "Then maybe," I replied. "He should have treated me like family." That ended the conversation. But the story wasn't over yet. 1 week later, Ethan showed up. Not with fanfare, not with fury. He knocked on my door wearing a wrinkled button-down and eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in days. There was no wedding ring on his finger. He held an envelope. I opened the door, not because I wanted to, but because part of me needed to hear what he'd say. Or maybe I just wanted to watch him struggle for words the way I had sat in silence weeks before. But he didn't say much. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat at my kitchen table, the same spot I'd used to cancel the wedding piece by piece. He slid the envelope toward me. "You should know the truth," he said. "I should have asked questions. I didn't. And I'm sorry, Mel. You didn't deserve any of it." Then he stood up and left. I didn't open the envelope right away. I stood at the sink, staring at the folded flap for what felt like an hour. When I finally pulled the papers out, they were meticulous, almost clinical. A timeline, screenshots of group chats, planning emails, budget breakdowns, credit card records. Isabel's handwriting scrawled across sticky notes. Every document told the same story. I had not volunteered. I had been volunteered, and then quietly deleted. There were messages between Isabel and Chloe laughing about how far Melissa will go before she wakes up. One line read, "She'll be lucky we even give her a chair." Another, "She's our power backup and wine sponsor." That's it. The final nail was a scan of a check from a joint account between Ethan and Isabel, 5 figures. In the memo line, "Final vendor payoff. Do not ask Melissa." That was when I understood. I was never meant to be at the wedding. I was meant to fund it, then vanish, like a ghost. After I finished reading every word of Ethan's envelope, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the heat in my throat that usually comes when you learn something that breaks your faith in someone you once considered part of your emotional spine. I just felt done. Because closure isn't always fireworks or confrontation. Sometimes it's just sitting alone in a kitchen with a stack of receipts and finally understanding you were never crazy. Just deeply, irreversibly used. The evidence was clinical. Every screenshot confirmed what I'd felt in my bones. This had been a long game. Not a sudden change of heart. Not wedding stress. Not a last-minute miscommunication. They had planned to exclude me from the beginning. From the moment I paid the venue deposit, I was slotted into a role. Financial asset. Not emotional participant. Everything else was theater. And yet, even armed with facts, the only thing I could think about was 10-year-old Ethan, the boy who asked me if Dad would still hear us when we talked to the sky. The boy who cried when I left for college and wrote me letters that smelled like peanut butter and Play-Doh. The boy who once told his 3rd grade class he wanted to be a doctor like his big sister. Where had that boy gone? I would never get that answer, but I could stop bleeding for it. A week later, I called Uncle Henry. He tried to toe the middle, talk about wedding pressure and how people act when they feel scrutinized. But I shut it down. It's not about a party, I said. It's about how easy it was for them to discard me once I'd served my purpose. He went quiet. They ghosted the glue, I added, and expected the house to hold. And that was the last conversation I had about the wedding. Months passed. Ethan moved out. Whether it was because of the backlash or because he finally saw Isabel's true colors, I didn't know. I didn't ask. I heard whispers from Mom about couples therapy, about Isabel launching some half-baked blog on resilience and healing, but I didn't look it up. I didn't need to see her latest self-styled redemption arc. I didn't care about her chapters anymore. I was writing my own. Spring came late that year. The kind of slow, reluctant thaw that matched exactly where I was emotionally. One Sunday, as I reorganized a drawer in the living room, my hand brushed against the envelope Isabel had left on my doorstep. I opened it again. I shouldn't have done that. I stared at it for a long moment, then stood, walked out to the grill on the back porch, and lit a match. The note curled fast, the way cheap stationery does. Ash flaked upward. I watched it until all that remained was dust, weightless and final. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like freedom. That's when I started redirecting my energy. Instead of pouring into people who saw me as a resource, I found those who saw me as a person. I reconnected with Noah. We talked about photography in the old college days, and one night over dinner, he said something that stuck with me. You know, sometimes being the ghost in someone else's disaster story is the best role. You move the plot, but you walk away clean. We laughed, but I felt something shift inside. That summer, I started a quiet project with him, a nonprofit that funded small weddings for couples coming out of hardship, military vets, refugee families, women rebuilding after domestic violence. No speeches, no Instagram page, no media features, Just 2 rules I paid in full. I saw the guest list first. Sometimes people ask me what the worst investment of my life was. I used to think it was Ethan's wedding, but now I know it wasn't the money. It was the version of myself I let them erase. The version that thought love meant sacrifice without limits. That showing up meant swallowing hurt to keep others shining. I don't believe that anymore. Now, I show up where I'm seen. I give only where there's space for me to exist, not just serve. And I don't need applause. I don't need closure from those who lack the language of accountability. I already got mine. Because sometimes the real revenge is no longer waiting for them to understand what they lost. It's simply knowing you never needed to be invited to a place where you had to beg to be valued. And walking away without ever looking back. Story 2. When I walked into my cousin's estate last summer, the last thing anyone expected was that I'd be the one holding the cards. Not that they ever saw me as capable of having any. Still drawing cartoons? My older brother Tim smirked, cradling his overpriced whiskey. I smiled politely and adjusted the strap of my weathered laptop bag. Inside was a decoy MacBook I kept just for these get-togethers. The real empire lived elsewhere. In plain sight, just never in the version of me they chose to acknowledge. Back home being a penthouse I didn't mention, I'd been reviewing the final paperwork. My company, a digital animation powerhouse I built from scratch, had just completed the acquisition of their family's company. They didn't know yet, but they were about to. My name's Lila Thompson. I'm 34 now, and for most of my adult life, I've played the part of the family oddball, the artsy one, the free spirit, that nice way of saying not a real success. They were wrong. My family is old school East Coast business royalty. My dad, Harold Thompson, made his fortune in enterprise software back in the 90s. He built Thompson Dynamics into a name Wall Street knew well. My brother Tim followed right behind, MBA, suits, the works. Even my mom, an interior designer with more awards than warmth, loved the prestige. Then there was me, the kid who filled sketchbooks instead of spreadsheets. From the beginning, my creativity was treated like a defect, a curiosity at best. When I turned down an Ivy League acceptance to pursue a degree in animation, the dining table went silent. Not angry, just embarrassed. "You're wasting your potential," Dad had said. Mom wiped her eyes like I'd just told them I was dying. To them, animation was a hobby, not a path, certainly not a business. What they didn't know, and what I never corrected, was that while I was at art school, I was also taking night classes in business management. Every brush stroke, every late-night storyboard was backed by spreadsheets and strategy. My first animation short took second place at a regional contest. Prize? A modest $3K check. I used it to hire 2 freelancers and launched my first project from a shoebox apartment in Queens. It was corporate work training videos, onboarding demos, product explainers, unsexy stuff, but highly profitable. Turns out, the corporate world was starving for good visual storytelling, and most animation studios didn't know how to talk to Fortune 500s. I did. I spoke both languages. Within 3 years, I had 25 employees. We became Halo Digital, and I quietly registered everything under the name Lila West, my middle name, my mother's maiden name. Nobody in my family put the dots together. Every family event, I played the same role: humble, struggling artist. I didn't lie, I just let them assume. By year 7, we were producing content for medical firms, aerospace, even national campaigns. Still, to the Thompsons, I was trying to make it in art, and that was fine. I didn't need their applause, but I never forgot their smirks, their pitying glances, the way Tim would offer to introduce me to someone in marketing like it was charity. 10 years in, Halo Digital was valued at over $120 million. We were actively expanding, and one of the companies on my radar? Thompson Dynamics. Why? Because they were pivoting into digital content. Because they were trying to break into my world. because they were about to unknowingly sell the keys to their future to the daughter they dismissed, and because revenge tastes better when it's served with legal paperwork and catered hors d'oeuvre. I got the reunion invitation in June, one of those heavy cardstock things with gold trim, held at Tim's new country home, just outside of Greenwich. My inbox pinged minutes after the board had just approved our acquisition offer. My team handled it all under a shell brand. They never saw my name, just Halo Holdings, LLC. The plan was simple: show up, stay under the radar, and wait. The press release was scheduled for Monday morning. The final signatures were already on the dock, and none of them suspected a thing. I drove the old Toyota Camry I had kept specifically for family gatherings. The real cars, locked in a garage in Manhattan, a Porsche Taycan, a classic 72 Jag. But the Camry? It fit their image of me, and I leaned into it. When I arrived, the driveway looked like a car show. Bentleys, Teslas, vintage BMWs. Tim was already outside, giving someone a tour of the garden. "Lila," he said, glancing down at my shoes. "Glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, eyes scanning the manicured hedges. Inside, the conversations were as predictable as ever: earnings, IPOs, mergers. No one asked about my work, just whether I was still doing the drawing thing. My mom pulled me aside near the wine bar. "You know, honey, Tim could use some creative help with the rebranding materials. Maybe you could do a few sketches?" She meant it as a kindness. I sipped my sparkling water and nodded. "I'll think about it." They all thought I was floating, not drowning, but drifting. Nice girl, big dreams, no foundation. I let them believe it. The night dragged. The music got louder. I answered the same 3 questions about my little animation gig at least 15 times. When Dad finally cornered me near the study, I knew the pitch was coming. "We've been talking," he began, voice slow with scotch. "Tim's team is launching a digital division. There's a spot if you want it. Entry level, of course, but it'd be a foot in the door." I nodded, pretended to consider it. "Sounds like a great opportunity," I said, fully aware I was finalizing the paperwork to eliminate that department entirely. My phone buzzed. A message from my coup, everything confirmed. "Monday morning, you're officially the new owner of Thompson Dynamics." Across the room, Tim was bragging about how they were about to crush the digital animation space. I raised my glass to him silently. If only he knew. I barely slept that night. Not because I was nervous. No, the nerves had left me a long time ago, back when I stopped caring about their approval. But I did lie awake, staring at the ceiling of my penthouse, thinking about how much pretending I'd done. 10 years. That's how long I let them believe I was a failure. 10 years of sitting at the kids' table even when I was 30. Of hearing "how's the art thing going?" in that same tone people use when they ask if your startup finally died. Of being the punchline at dinners. And now, in less than 12 hours, I'd be standing in the boardroom of a company my family built, owning it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was up before the sun. Wore a navy blue pantsuit tailored so well it moved like a second skin. Simple gold jewelry. No flashy brand logos, no statement pieces. Just sharp lines and silence. At 8:30 sharp, Marcus, my coup, picked me up in a sleek black town car. We didn't say much on the way. We'd rehearsed everything. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted every single detail to be perfect. I didn't want revenge to feel loud. I wanted it to feel inevitable. By 9:00 a.m., we were stepping into the lobby of Thompson Dynamics headquarters. Yes, the same building where I used to wait in the car while Dad wrapped up meetings on weekends. The same building where I wasn't allowed to touch anything because this isn't a place for playtime. Funny how things change. The receptionist smiled at Marcus, then looked at me curiously. She didn't recognize me. That was fine. I wanted the surprise to land all at once. When the elevator opened to the top floor, I could already hear Tim's voice booming through the glass doors of the boardroom. "We're on the brink of a major pivot," he was saying. "Once this partnership is locked in, we'll have full control of the digital space." I stepped in quietly. Every head turned, and for a second, no one spoke. "Lila?" Tim blinked. "What are you doing here?" I set my briefcase on the table and nodded toward Marcus, who began passing out folders. "This is a closed meeting," Dad said, frowning. "Security." "She's fine," Marcus cut in calmly. "She has full access. Check the paperwork." I opened my folder. Slide 1. Halo Digital Acquisition of Thompson Dynamics. Effective as of this morning. "What the hell is this?" Tim asked, flipping pages. His face was pale. "I'm the buyer," I said, simply. "Halo Holdings is Halo Digital, and I'm the founder. The CEO, the one who bought you out." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was pure, stunned paralysis. Dad leaned back in his chair, staring down at the signature pages. His initials were right there. He'd signed them last week, thinking it was just a mid-tier tech firm looking for back-end infrastructure. "You bought us?" he said finally, voice flat. "I did." Tim's jaw clenched. "This is some kind of joke." "Nope, it's just business." I turned to the board. "The acquisition is final. Your equity is intact, but there are some structural changes coming. Effective immediately." I passed out another folder. "Tim, your position is being dissolved. We'll offer you a transition package if you want to stick around for project consulting. Dad, you'll move into an advisory role until your official retirement at the end of the quarter." Dad's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. "Why didn't you say anything?" he finally asked. "Because you never listened," I thought. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Because every time I tried to talk about my career, you laughed. I said instead. Because you thought art wasn't a real job, and because you didn't see any value in what I was building unless it looked like what you understood. Tim stood up, hands gripping the back of his chair. "You're just an artist." "I'm an artist," I said, "and a strategist, and a founder, and now I'm your boss." The board chair cleared his throat. "Well, I guess this is unexpected." I smiled. "It's not unexpected if you paid attention." They didn't argue much after that. Once you show people a signed deal, legal approval, and a new leadership chart with your name at the top, the conversation tends to shift quickly. By the time we wrapped, most of them were still blinking through the fog of confusion. My family didn't say much, but their faces told me enough. They weren't angry. They were embarrassed. Not because I'd tricked them, but because I'd done something they couldn't wrap their heads around. I didn't play their game and I still won. When I got back to my office, the media coverage was already rolling in. Animation firm acquires legacy tech giant. The business sites were eating it up. Tim called 3 times that afternoon. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't being petty. I was just done. Done trying to explain myself. Done shrinking to fit their definition of success. Done waiting for a version of their approval that was never coming. That night, we had a private dinner at a quiet French place in Midtown. I rented the private room. I invited the whole family, not to gloat, just to clarify things. I walked in wearing the same simple suit from that morning. Tim was already seated. Dad was nursing a bourbon. Nobody said a word when I entered. I sat down, ordered a drink, and waited. Eventually, Mom leaned in, barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked at her for a long second. Not cruel, just tired. "Would it have made a difference?" She blinked. "We would have been proud. No, you would have tried to change it, mold it, attach it to Thompson. You would have called it a passion project and tried to take control." Tim frowned. "You think that little animation company can replace this?" "Not replace," I said calmly. "Evolve." The room fell quiet again. I lifted my glass to seeing things for what they really are, and to building something, even when no one believes you can. No one clapped. No one raised their glass. That was fine. I wasn't looking for cheers. I'd already won. The next morning, I stood by the windows of my office, the real one, not the decoy laptop and coffee shop version they all thought I lived in. From 38 floors up, the city looked soft, like a painting, gray light, mist on glass, the quiet before the phones start ringing and the world demands your voice. I poured my coffee, let it sit untouched for a minute. My inbox had exploded overnight. Investors, press, congratulatory emails from CEOs who'd once ignored my cold calls. LinkedIn messages from people who hadn't spoken to me since college. The tone was always the same. Didn't realize you were doing something this big. That was the point. I didn't need them to know. Not until it was done. A few hours later, I headed into what used to be the Thompson Dynamics all-hands meeting. It was now a Halo digital town hall, rebranded, restructured, reborn. Some faces looked skeptical, a few nervous. One guy in the second row just looked pissed. I didn't blame them. Change is scary when you've been coasting on the old way for too long. I stood at the front in black jeans and a charcoal blazer. No tie, no corporate mask, just me. I know I'm not who you expected to lead this company, I said. And I know some of you probably Googled me last night and asked yourself, who the hell is Lila West? That got a few awkward chuckles. Well, I built Halo from a secondhand desk and a 10-year-old laptop. We started with client explainer videos and grew into immersive virtual training systems for Fortune 500s. What we lacked in size, we made up for in vision. A pause. And now, we're going to rebuild this company into something better. Not by cutting people, not by gutting the culture, but by adapting, innovating, listening. I scanned the room. I'm not here to erase what you built. I'm here to finish what I started, and if you're willing to try a new way of doing things, there's a place for you here. After the meeting, people came up. Some were hopeful. A few were cautious. A few told me, in quiet voices, that the old leadership had been stuck. This might be what we needed, one of them said. And that meant more than any headline. Later that afternoon, Tim showed up at my office, unannounced. Still looked like he hadn't slept. His blazer was wrinkled, tie crooked. I let him in anyway. He looked around the space, clean lines, calm light, walls covered in concept art and innovation charts. This is yours? He asked. I nodded. Has been for a while. He stood awkwardly for a moment. I don't get it, he finally said. How did we not know? Because you weren't looking, I said. Not angry, just honest. You saw what you wanted to see. He rubbed the back of his neck, pacing. I thought you were just playing around. You did, I said. So did Dad. So did everyone. He sat down in one of the armchairs across from my desk. Looked smaller than I remembered. You know, he said, if you'd told us what you were doing, you'd have tried to shape it, make it look like Thompson, turn it into a side division, brand it with your logo and your metrics. He didn't argue. You were the golden boy, I said. You were handed the keys. I had to build the road first. Tim looked away, then back at me. So, now what? I leaned back in my chair. Now, we rebuild. You can be part of it, or not. Your call. But the rules are different this time. He looked down at his hands. And then finally he nodded. I'll think about it. That was enough. By the end of that week, the news had fully settled. Clients called in with cautious optimism. Investors leaned in. Internally, we got to work new systems, creative labs, restructuring admin flow. The Thompson name phased out gently. Not erased, just archived. Mom emailed me. Said she was still processing. Asked if I'd come by for dinner. I said I'd think about it. One night, I pulled out an old sketchbook from my closet, the same one I used in college. Corners worn, cover fraying. Inside were the first storyboards. I ever drew, the ones I used to imagine worlds I'd never been allowed to create in real life. Near the back, I'd written something in tiny letters. Success isn't what they say it is. It's doing what they said you couldn't, and not needing them to clap when you do. I closed the book and smiled. That weekend, I walked the High Line with a coffee in one hand and silence in the other. My phone buzzed a few times. Family, press. Some board members still confused about who I was. I didn't answer, not because I was bitter, but because the story had already been told. Quietly, sharply, completely. Sometimes you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk in quietly and show them what you've built while they were too busy looking the other way. Story 3. They said it was a vacation. Just the three of us, no work calls, no siblings, no passive-aggressive car rides. My name's Mira. I was 17, burned out from high school and burnt bridges. When my parents dropped the surprise, we're taking a trip to Portugal. Fresh start. I wanted to believe them. Honestly, I needed to. I'd been screwing up, skipping class, getting into stupid fights, failing math like it was a hobby. My mom called it a rough patch. My dad just didn't talk much. His silence was a language in itself. So, when they said they wanted to reset, to reconnect, I clung to that hope like a lifeline. The first few days were awkward but manageable. We walked along cobbled streets, ate custard tarts by the water, and pretended we were a functioning family. My mom even took selfies with me outside castles she couldn't pronounce. For a minute, I let myself believe maybe this was the turning point. Spoiler, it wasn't. We were supposed to fly home on a Monday morning, had breakfast together, buffet eggs, burnt toast, and the strained small talk of people who've run out of ways to lie to each other. My mom was wearing her bright red lipstick, the one she saved for job interviews and divorce lawyer meetings. My dad had his usual black coffee and unread newspaper. Then, she said it. We're just running down the block to pick up souvenirs. Be back in 15. I didn't even look up, just mumbled cool, while texting my best friend back in Chicago about how painfully awkward everything had been. They never came back. An hour passed, then 3. Hotel checkout came and went. I asked the front desk if they'd seen them. The clerk blinked at me and said, "The couple from room 304? They checked out this morning." Checked. Out. I ran to the room. Empty. My stuff. Gone. Suitcase. Passport. Even my dumb little bag with the broken zipper. All missing. Like I'd never been there at all. Their phones? Straight to voicemail. Messages? Not delivered. Panic was too soft a word for what I felt. I cried so hard I started dry heaving behind a row of bushes across the street. I wasn't just lost, I was erased. I went to the U.S. Embassy the next morning. The woman behind the bulletproof glass was kind, but firm. After clicking away on her computer for too long, she looked at me with a face I'll never forget and said, "Your return ticket was canceled. Your name has been removed from their emergency contact and insurance. I'm really sorry. They hadn't forgotten me. They removed me." That night, shivering behind a closed bakery, I found a note, stuffed into my denim jacket pocket. It was my mom's handwriting, neat and sharp. "You're 17, old enough to survive." That was it. No explanation. Just one sentence that broke me harder than any screaming match ever could. The first week, I barely slept. I curled up near the bakery dumpster, where it was warm enough to not die. I stole bread crusts, begged strangers in broken Portuguese, and cried when no one was watching. On day 4, I got caught trying to swipe a cooling roll off a tray. That's when I met Rosa. She looked like someone's grandmother, stern bun, flour-covered apron, and eyes that could split granite. She didn't yell, didn't scold, just said, "If you're hungry, you work." That sentence saved me. Rosa ran the place alone. Let me scrub pans and carry sacks of flour heavier than I was. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't give answers. That night, she handed me a blanket and pointed to a cot wedged between a sack of sugar and an old espresso machine. It wasn't a home, but it was shelter. She never asked what happened. I think she already knew. Weeks passed. I learned enough Portuguese to follow basic orders. Knead, clean, fold. Rosa wasn't warm exactly, but she was consistent. And when you've been abandoned, consistency is kindness. Sometimes while wiping down the counters, she'd mutter things like, "My daughter loved bread that much, too." But she never mentioned her again. One night, she left a misshapen loaf, too ugly to sell, wrapped in paper by my cot. She did that every night after. A silent ritual I never questioned. I found a busted laptop behind a recycling bin. Spent a month fixing it with parts from a repair shop that sometimes let me work for Wi-Fi time. I enrolled in an online GED program, studied in the bakery's backroom, while surrounded by the hum of fridges and the smell of cinnamon. That stupid note from my mom? I kept it, not out of love, but as proof that I was still standing, still surviving. Then something shifted. I read an article, in English, about a small shipping company in Lisbon, restructuring. I had €200 saved in a sock for new shoes. I threw it into the stock. It tripled. It was the first time in forever I felt like more than a ghost. I started studying every business article I could get my hands on. Found PDFs of Warren Buffett's essays in online forums. Translated financial blogs. Obsessed. Rosa caught me once with spreadsheets open, muttered, "Playing CEO now?" and smirked. By 20, I had clients. By 22, I was helping local shop owners optimize inventory and manage online orders. I registered a legit consulting firm under a Portuguese alias. Nothing flashy, just real. I never posted about my work. I didn't want my name out there. I wanted peace, distance, power, and silence. But no matter how far I climbed, part of me was still that girl on the sidewalk, looking for parents who'd already erased her. That part never really dies. You just learn to build around it. And then one morning, Rosa slid a newspaper across the counter. "You might want to look at this," she said, barely glancing up from her coffee. At the bottom of the business listings, in small bold text, foreclosure, single-family property, Tallahassee, FL. My parents' address. I stared at the street name like it was a ghost. They'd bought that house after ditching me, paraded it on social media as their new beginning. Now, it was slipping through their fingers. Something inside me, something cold, sharp, and old, stirred. I booked a flight. The flight back to the US didn't feel like a homecoming. It felt like reconnaissance. I hadn't been on American soil in almost a decade, and I wasn't coming back to catch up or forgive. I was coming back with a plan. Quiet, sharp, legal. I traveled under my business name, Mira Lopes Consulting, a legit Portuguese entity with tax records, client testimonials, and enough financials to blend in with the bidding crowd. I didn't use my birth name, not because I was hiding, because I wasn't theirs anymore. The house was listed in a foreclosure auction, tucked behind a county clerk's office in a sunny Florida parking lot. Picture plastic chairs, retirees with tablets, real estate agents in khakis, and exactly one bakery-raised revenge girl in dark sunglasses and a pressed blazer. Rosa came with me. She stood calm beside me, hands folded around the bidding card like she'd been doing this her whole life. When the auction started, I barely spoke, just whispered numbers to Rosa, and she raised the card without hesitation. No emotion, just business. Some guy tried to outbid us, boat shoes, squinting like we were lost. But Rosa didn't blink. When the final call came, sold to bidder 287, I didn't cheer. I didn't even breathe. I just nodded. That house, their house, was mine. The one they moved into after leaving me halfway across the world. The one where they posted filtered photos of new furniture and Sunday brunches like they hadn't erased their child with a folded note. Now it was legally mine, down to the mailbox. A week later, the official notice went out. Certified mail. with all the necessary legal garnish, ownership transfer, 30-day vacancy required, no negotiation. I don't know what I expected. Screaming? Silence? A handwritten apology on floral stationery? What I got was a phone call from a lawyer. The voice on the other end asked if Miss Lopes would be willing to meet with the current occupants of the home to discuss terms. I said yes. I didn't tell Rosa who we were meeting. I didn't need to. She knew. The meeting took place in a neutral little real estate office, all laminate wood and stale coffee. I arrived 10 minutes early. Sat facing the door, back straight, breathing steady. They walked in late. My mom first, beige sweater, oversized sunglasses, pretending this was beneath her. My dad behind her, quiet, holding a worn manila folder like it could protect him from what was coming. They didn't recognize me. Not right away. I waited. Then I took off my glasses. That's when it hit them. My mother froze, lips parted. My father looked like someone had unplugged his spine. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. You left me, I said. No money, no passport, no goodbye. My mom fidgeted. We thought it would be easier. If we disappeared. Easier for who? I asked, not really needing an answer. You were impossible to live with, she said, voice getting brittle. Always dramatic, always fighting. I cut her off. I was 17. My father still hadn't said anything. I turned to him. Say something. He swallowed hard. Your mom thought. I didn't ask what she thought, I said. I asked why you let it happen. He couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't think you'd survive. Well, I said, you were wrong. And then I slid the deed across the table. Signed. Stamped. Done. My mother looked like she might pass out. My father just stared at the paper like it was in another language. Rosa stepped in from the side room, clipboard in hand, professional face on. You'll need to hand over the keys within 30 days, she said. You'll get the full timeline by mail. That's when my mother finally cracked. You can't do this. We're your parents. I just looked at her. No, you were. You made your choice in Lisbon. She started to cry. Not real tears, not at first. The kind of crying meant to make you feel guilty. But it didn't land. Not anymore. Rosa placed a sealed envelope in front of her. Instructions, legally binding. My father's hands were trembling. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel much at all. I stood up to leave. Why now? My mom asked. After all these years, I paused, looked her in the eye. Because I didn't need you to come back, I said. I needed you to know I did. And I walked out. They posted about me after that. Claimed I was ungrateful. Said I'd come out of nowhere, manipulated some technicality, and stole their home. I didn't reply. Let them write their stories. I was too busy building something real. I didn't just take the house. I rebuilt it. The siding, repainted, the kitchen, new floors, new counters. We pulled down the cheesy live, laugh, love signs and replaced them with bookshelves, warm lighting, and soft blankets. We turned the master bedroom into a shared dorm space. 2 bunk beds, new sheets, lockers for personal things. We called it the second door because some kids never got to walk through the first. Rosa started teaching again, baking classes every Wednesday. Girls just like I was, too young to be alone, too old for anyone to legally care. She taught them how to shape dough, how to measure with instinct, how to keep going even if your bread collapsed the first time. I taught them how to set up bank accounts, build resumes, find Wi-Fi. I showed them how to make money that didn't depend on someone else's approval. The first week, 6 girls showed up. 1 wouldn't speak. 1 flinched every time someone laughed. 1 cried just getting new socks. Rosa smiled and said, let them breathe. The rest comes later. That night, I stood in the backyard of the house they abandoned me for. The air smelled like cinnamon and lemon soap. Laughter came from the windows, not hollow, not fake. Real. Full. Rosa stood beside me, sipping tea from a chipped mug. "You still feel like you don't have a home?" she asked. I looked at the lights inside, at the shoes by the front door, at the girl braiding her hair in the hallway mirror, the one curled up on the couch, finally asleep. "This isn't just home," I said. "It's where we all begin again." I thought that was the end of it. I thought buying the house, rebuilding it, turning it into something real, would be the closing chapter. I thought I could walk away and let the silence settle. But people like them, they don't sit in silence. They don't reflect. They spin. They reach. They panic. 3 weeks after they moved out, left the keys in a cheap envelope at the real estate office, and vanished like ghosts. The posts started. Photos of their old home, tagged stolen. Comments about betrayal. Words like brainwashed, ungrateful, twisted. They made it sound like I was some stranger who showed up out of nowhere and took everything from them. They never used my name, but they didn't have to. The tone said it all. At first, I ignored it, let them scream into their echo chamber. But then someone sent me a video, my mother, on some live stream with a friend of a friend, crying on cue, telling a story where they were the victims, just loving parents trying their best who lost their daughter to bitterness. And I almost laughed. Almost. But it hit me. Suddenly, they still didn't get it. They didn't understand that I didn't need them to admit what they did. I didn't need revenge like fire and ash. I just needed the story to be mine again. And it was. We kept building, quietly, week by week. More girls came to the house, some from shelters, some from nowhere in particular. One had nothing but a plastic bag of clothes and a notebook full of poems. Another walked in with bruises under her sleeves and didn't speak for 3 days. But when she finally did, her first words were, "Do I have to go back?" And I said, "No," because I knew what it meant to beg the world not to send you back. We called the house Second Door out loud now, even painted it on the mailbox. There was no plaque, no big launch, just the name, and a quiet understanding. Here, you start over. Here, no one erases you. Rosa kept teaching. She'd hum old folk songs in the kitchen while the dough rose. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at the girls like she was seeing something she thought she'd never get back. One day she left a small photo beside my laptop, black and white. A little girl with flour on her nose and wild curls. "My daughter," she said. I didn't ask where she was now. She didn't say. Some losses don't get explained. They just live inside you, quietly shaping who you shelter. Months passed. We built a garden in the backyard. The kind that grows crooked at first, but then surprises you. Mint, tomatoes, even sunflowers that leaned toward the house like they were grateful. One night, as we finished dinner, leftover stew and fresh bread, a girl named Kiara asked if she could hang lights on the back porch. "Something soft," she said. "Something that doesn't feel like survival mode." And I nodded, because I knew exactly what she meant. That night, I stood outside under the glow of tiny yellow bulbs strung above the cracked patio. I thought about how far we'd come, about the girl I was, back in Lisbon, behind a bakery, shaking from cold and grief, about the people who made me believe I wasn't enough. And I felt no hatred, just distance. That was the real power. Not proving them wrong, not shouting my truth at the top of my lungs, just standing still, whole, unbothered, free. A few weeks later, Rosa got a letter, handwritten, addressed to the new owner. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother. It was short. "Whatever you think we did, we were trying our best. We didn't know how to help you. You scared us. You were falling apart and we couldn't afford to fall with you. We thought maybe you'd hate us less if we left. I know we were wrong. I hope you're happy now." I folded it up, put it in a box, didn't answer. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's choosing not to let someone back into the space they abandoned. 1 year after we opened Second Door, we hosted a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just music, warm food, and a slideshow of all the girls who'd come through. Kiara gave a toast. Said she used to think she'd never belong anywhere again. Said that now. She had sisters who held her without asking questions. She finished by saying, "This house saved me." Everyone clapped. Rosa cried for the first time in public. I just stood there, heart pounding like a drum. Not from nerves, from something deeper. Gratitude. Not for what I went through, but for who I became because of it. I still keep that note. The original one, crumpled in the pocket of my old denim jacket. The one my mom left me with. "You're 17, old enough to survive." She wasn't wrong. I did survive. But I didn't stop there. I turned survival into sanctuary. I turned exile into empire. And I didn't do it out of hate. I did it because someone had to show the next girl that she could start again, even if the first door slammed in her face. Especially then. So if you ever find yourself in the dark, holding a note that says you're on your own, come find us. The light's still on, and the door's open.